Toriel's death is a pretty brilliant piece of game design. It's the first time most players will really be forced to kill a character in Undertale, and everything the game sets up from its marketing to its characters paints this clear indication that you're somehow supposed to prevent this. So when you do reset the game and Flowey does acknowledge your guilt, it's this huge moment where the player realizes what the game is actually about. Of course, it never actually plays out like this. Personally, the way I found out how to spare Toriel was by saying I killed her to a bunch of my friends in the 5th grade, who reacted about as well as you'd think. It's a pretty common story, I'd imagine. Undertale was the biggest thing since Sliced Jesus, and experiencing it on your own terms would have you crucified in the 2010s, so I think it's become easy to forget the effort Toby put into getting all his ideas across. And seeing as the kids who grew up with the game are now old enough to start making their own, I think it's worth trying to examine this effort in a vacuum just to give everyone a sense of perspective. In the broad strokes, you could split Undertale up into 4 major areas, with each focusing on 2 major characters, the buddy and the antagonist. This focused formula mixed with the fact Undertale paces its progression through linear set pieces allows you to get attached to the characters in spite of the game's very kid-friendly tone. We're humans, we like when things are familiar, and the best way to get us to understand something is to see it happen over and over again. This is also why each of the main characters has some kind of connection to the underlying divide between humans and monsters. The game doesn't just tell us there was a war, it shows us the scars of the event. Monsters attack you on sight, many bosses are in the military, and even someone as innocent as Papyrus devotes basically every day to kidnapping children to send them off to get killed at the castle. But Undertale is also a friendly game. The monsters have lives and aspirations outside of the conflict, and you can reach those better sides of them in order to make friends, which is ultimately the heart of the game. I see a lot of people misunderstand this as advocating for forgiving people no matter what, and while the game doesn't really end up beating those allegations, I see it more as a game about overcoming division, reaching the humanity, and even something as universally antagonized as video game monsters. You were meant to go into Undertale with the assumption drilled into you that monsters had to die. It's why the whole trend of games having mercy options tacked on after Undertale really irked me, because in a post-Undertale world, the assumption going into games was flipped. Killing things is bad now, and any game where you can opt out of it will lock you into a bad ending if you kill even just a single character. Which sucks, because killing things is fun, and if you want to make a game where not killing is just as fun, you're gonna have to try a lot harder than just dialogue options. Admittedly, the way you show mercy in Undertale isn't that interesting. Outside of the acts that change the way you engage with the bullet patterns, act and fight are just different variations on using your turn to make the enemy disappear. But what really makes the mercy system work is the ability for player expression. Even beyond the main characters, there's this very big sense of community in the underground. Monsters are often placed in these big, obvious set pieces together, so if you kill just one guy, it becomes immediately apparent that not only is something missing, but that it was your decision that made it that way. It doesn't matter if most people never kill the enemies and only go for the pacifist route, because the fact that you could have killed them is enough to make the decision not to feel all the more impactful. It's that illusion of things mattering that really makes a mechanic like this. Undertale just wouldn't have hit as hard if it didn't have these scenes, making it very clear that your actions had consequences. It forces the player to reflect on what they did or didn't do, so even if you're likely just doing true pacifist like everyone else, you still get the sense your decisions had an impact on the world. A brief mention here also goes to the genocide route. There's this really lame thing games did in the 2010s where they were like, "You like killing people, don't you?" Listen, motherfucker! I don't kill people in video games because I'm gonna shoot up a school. I'm doing it because I want to fight Sans Undertale! And the game says about as much during the encounter. It points out how you're not doing evil things in a game because of your real morals, but because you're trying to get more content out of a fictional story. Still, I'd say the worst impact of everybody knowing these routes going in is that you probably already know all this stuff. We live in a world post-fandom where most people nut to a character like 7 times before they realize what series they're from, so there's no need to really properly set a character up. Just give them a good design and some kind of relatable mental health problem and people will just latch onto it. I find Undertale to be so well written as an indie because it's completely standalone. You don't need to engage with any sort of wiki or theory to get invested. Everything is right there in the work itself, and nothing exemplifies this better than Sans. Even just hearing the is enough to activate an entire army of Israeli sleeper agents, but that cult obsession for the character didn't just grow from the mold. Before MatPat can Trojan horse him into killing the Pope, Sans was just the shadowy figure right outside the ruins. The entire previous hour with Flowey and Toriel was setting up this idea that we'd eventually end up facing these crazed, murderous monsters. and it's an assumption the game twists into a punchline that perfectly introduces his character. He's cunning and competent enough to sneak up on you like that, but nowhere near as motivated to act on it as Papyrus, who ends up taking the center stage as the area's antagonist. Sans, meanwhile, has a mainly passive presence throughout the game. There are a couple invitations here or there that he might have some kind of bigger role, but nothing seems too out of place until you get to the dinner scene. Sans pretty much spills the beans on everything. He's actively friends with Toriel and has been keeping track of you this entire time. Not only that, but he's probably aware of your ability to save and reload. The whole thing is pretty well written, with good attention to detail on the two sides of Sans' character, but most importantly, all the details hinting at these things exist regardless of the route you're on. Even in the event the dinner scene is skipped, every playthrough eventually ends up with the Judgment Hall scene, whose sheer variability and aura ended up cementing Sans as an icon of pop culture. Having been developing my own game for 2 years now, there's a certain amount of meat hook cynicism I've gained towards the way things are written. Especially in the indie space, it feels like ideas are being prioritized over the ability to convey them to the audience, and frankly, why would they? If something doesn't make sense to you, then there's a million people who are going to tell you what it means. But everything in Undertale is incredibly self-evident. Sure, it doesn't have the best dialogue or graphics or even the prerequisite strategy to be considered an RPG, but it's probably the best written indie mega hit out there. It consistently gets across everything it wants you to think and feel about itself. Even someone like me who, being honest, doesn't really love Undertale, still smiled like a complete idiot throughout the whole finale. I said something to this effect from the last video, but I didn't get all these notes by subjecting Toby to microwave torture until he told me how to make Undertale. And even if this dog-shaped lump in my throat was Toby, copying his notes one for one isn't the kind of lick you'd assume it'd be. If Undertale came out in today's market, it wouldn't be nearly as popular. Not because of any intrinsic issue with it aging poorly, but because you'd be releasing Undertale into a market where we already have Undertale. The bar is inherently higher, not only in regards to quality, but novelty as well, so if you really want to reach that level, look back at the things that inspired you. Don't just hold them down and trace over them, copying all the little details because, well, Undertale did it. Really interrogate why you like them in the first place. If you can hold on to that love and pay it forward in your own way, I think whatever you make will turn out special.